We create one identity that you have a simple login across different applications. That enables kind of reputation network because the trust and signals that you get from one platform are now reusable across different platforms. All of that is pointed at enabling new funding systems for regeneration at scale.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Learning Lab. This is Ma Earth's online community where we've been sharing tools, skills, and stories in service of ecological regeneration with experts and enthusiasts. Traditionally, we've been doing sessions on place-based regeneration, exploring topics like biochar or landscape rehydration. But today, we're digging into a meta systems thinking approach and exploring open technology for land stewardship. I'm our host and facilitator, Sophia Rockland, and our session today is called Empowering Land Stewardship with Open Technology. We're joined by Holke Brammer, who is a friend and colleague of the Ma Earth ecosystem. And Holke is going to be showing us a demo of some of the technology behind visionary financial technology designed to distribute funding to land projects around the world. So we'll get into more detail about that. Be sure to sign up for Ma Earth's Learning Lab calendar in today's show notes. And if you ever have a conversation about regeneration that you really want to dig into, just send us an email at community@maearth.com. Okay, so Holke is a political economist with a PhD from Stanford Business School who focused specifically on different collective technologies and tools for coordination. So that work is reflected in his current work leading the Hypercerts Foundation and developing a new project, which we're going to learn about today, called Certified. So stick with us for a little bit, and then at the end of this session, we'll kind of dig into a bit more of a conversation around how this technology can be useful for land projects and ecological regenerators. To take a step back, I want to introduce why I feel like this technology is really interesting and important for ecological regeneration. My background is working in land protection with Amazonian communities for the last decade, and I was doing that in the capacity of nonprofit fundraising. So my task was essentially to write applications for funding and then submit reports based on that funding and the projects that we were exploring. So those projects ranged from territorial monitoring to planting trees to developing bioeconomies locally. And what we often found is that we would submit reports to large donors or organizations, grant-making organizations, and we didn't really know what happened with that data. And maybe after several years of relationship with those funders, the project ends as they normally do, but what becomes of that data kind of remains a mystery. And not only that, but the data that we actually create ends up shaping the narratives and the priorities for our work on the ground, even though that may not necessarily be the top priority for the land. So let me give you an example. If a funder is really, really focused on carbon mitigation, but folks on the ground are really, really specifically focused on biodiversity, increasing biodiversity, if your funding is based on carbon mitigation uniquely, then you might begin to miss some of the nuance and the beauty of your initial topic of interest. So this has many applications for different projects around the world, but essentially what we're kind of exploring with Ma Earth is what happens when land stewards can create, shape, and own their data to articulate in meaningful terms for them change in their ecosystems. So we're going to be diving into a live demo of some of this technology with Holke, and we hope you enjoy. Thank you so much. Holke, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the wonderful introduction. Really excited to be here, especially because of the wide range of people that already said like where they're coming from and the experiences that you have. So I'm also very interested in what questions you have. So please fill the chat. All right, I will start this presentation. And what we want to talk about today is open technology and how that can really be in service for land stewardship. Where I want to start is kind of a very general point about the technology that we have today. And the technology that we have today is one that is dominated by platforms. So you have posts where the posts are stored on the servers of X. You have your pictures on your apps that's owned by Meta. You have videos owned by Google, reviews on Google Maps that is owned by Google, and your reviews on Amazon are also owned by Amazon. Music, even if you're an artist, you put it up, and Spotify kind of gates who has access to your music. And to really drive this home is like, suppose you're a content creator and you put up a video on YouTube, you cannot control like how you will have access to this video. It is always kind of through YouTube that this video is accessed. And many of you actually like report also on your stuff via posts on social media. So these posts are in that way, you have not full control of this data anymore. So the user data today in the wide range of the internet is locked in silos and not accessible across applications. So you are not in full control of your own stuff. Why this matters is because this is also true for impact reports and project profiles, as Sophia already introduced in her introduction. And this is, if you have a crowdfunding platform, you basically have a profile there. And if you go to a different platform, you create another profile there. If you apply to a grant of a foundation, you fill out that form, and the data that you put in lives basically with that funder. And luckily, a lot of those platforms and funders, they don't do like bad things with your data, but there is basically a better way of organizing all of this that really puts you as a land steward in control. And here, why I kind of added the impact reports and project profiles to the other things is because the data that you have is not just impact reports and project profiles. It's actually also your normal posts, your normal pictures and videos and reviews that you have also sometimes as a land steward. And so what we want to do is getting out of this paradigm, and many people actually work on this already. So we are not starting from zero, and we are also not starting with a new idea, because what we want to create again is something that has been there already or is there, and that is kind of how websites run today. Because websites, you have a domain that is owned by you, and you have your content, and that content can be on different servers. So you can host it on Cloudflare, Hetzner, Amazon Web Services, or on your own server. So it really doesn't matter where the data is stored. And that's very different from the platforms that we saw before, because you are not in control where your data is stored. And to some extent, like the important thing is not where the data is stored, but that the people who store your data don't gate the access, who can access and how the data can be accessed. So if you transfer that to land projects, well, actually, if I go back, so this is in that way, if you go to your website through a browser, and you can use different browsers, the access point to the content doesn't depend on where the data is stored. So applying that to your data and your identity, like you as an organization or a project, a land steward, what if you could actually store your data with any kind of provider, or you could also host your data yourself? So that is the vision that we have. And what that enables is that you are also in control of how you are using this data. So you can use your data and basically make sure that specific funders get it, specific funding platforms specific evaluators can also add data about your projects that others can use, or you can also have like other applications like a community app. And the community app can have access to your data. And this is only possible if you are more in control of your own data. But like where it is stored should be kind of less important. What we have built for this, and I will go into more details about kind of what technology it is built on. Here it already says it's built on at protocol. But first I will actually like demonstrate it and show you how this looks like when you have an account that is independent of any platform. All right, now we are in the live demo. That's always a risky aspect, but let's see. So what we do is we just sign in with our email address, and we get a one-time password, and I will just enter the code from my phone so that I don't have to show all of you my emails.
Holke, real quick, I'm going to jump in. Can you just like very quickly give us a background on like what this is running on, what else runs on AT Proto, and like, yeah, just again, like introduce us to like what the passageway to certified is, because you just cut out there for a quick second.
Okay, so I actually will return to this. So right now I will just like demo how it works, and then I will go into like the infrastructure behind it. I think it just like I will try to show how it looks, and then the background, what else is the infrastructure behind it, I will have later in the presentation, and we'll go into the details as well. And so what we have here is now my user profile. And what you also see is that there's a DID. A DID is a decentralized identifier that identifies my profile across basically the whole internet. And what we will do now is from this profile, I will create a new group because we can think of this as kind of the your organization that cares for a land. So we create this group. We'll go just with this group for now. We will check back in a second. But so this is now a group account where we have the test group 3. Also, this is identified with a unique identifier. And this is not something that is visible for you, or like you need to engage with kind of the DID when you actually like do anything, but it's just a symbol for you that there's a stable identifier for you across kind of the different platforms. What we also have here is that there are different members that are part of this. I have added here the contributors to the certified project and Hypercerts. So this is Shafi, Adam, and Kama that have also all worked on this with me. And what I want to show you now is that this profile here that we had here with the test group is basically also accessible through a very different interface. So here we are on hyperscan.dev. Hyperscan.dev is a platform where you have the full view on what happens in kind of the certified and Hypercerts ecosystem. And you can see here the certified profile. This is exactly the same profile, and here now in a more structured data view that we also had here on this interface from certified.app. And what I try to show with this is that your data is independent of the platform, the front end that you see the data from. And now you should see certified again. And what you have now is that I'm logged in with Holke.xyz. And Holke.xyz is also an admin of this same organization. And what we can do now is we just change the name on this one platform. Live demo. always a
Live
little bit
demo. This is our
challenging.
first Learning Lab live demo.
Exactly. Imagine, so basically what should be possible here, we put in the display name, and then if we would go back to the other screen here, this data would change in parallel. So the interfaces that you interact with your data are independent of the data, independent of the data layer. So it's just different views. So in this case, certified.app and Hyperscan are a different view on the same data.
And Holke, I'd like to just kind of situate what we're seeing a little bit for the land stewards that are joining us now. Part of it is that what Holke mentioned at the beginning is that, again, a lot of our data is aggregated by these singular corporations and organizations like Meta or Amazon or whoever it may be. And what you're actually seeing here is what the back end of what a decentralized experience would look like, right? So what would it look like if it's not just one aggregate organization with a CEO and a centralized body that's actually running the way that our data is managed. But what I like to think of in this ecosystem is this is an aspirational technology, right? We know that ultimately this is not in service of a beautiful world that we want to see, where things are decentralized, that we're making collective decisions about things, we're governing things in community. So what you see here is basically literally the tracks of what that would look like. And I'll go into it a little bit more, but we sometimes like to call this Web 2.5 in our community. So for those of us who have seen, you may have heard of Web 3, the blockchain, and sort of that whole ecosystem is that complete decentralization. So Holke is doing the hard work of actually creating the tracks that would make that lived experience exist. So please continue to drop your questions in the chat, and Holke, take it away from here. Yeah, keep going.
Cool. Yes. So where we are now is that we have different user profiles, so individual profiles that represent you. And then we have kind of the organizational profiles that represents you as a group that steward land. And this is only the basic building block. What we want to actually get into is kind of the project data that matters. And the data that matters is the data that involves at least these three categories of actors. These are the land stewards, but then also the funders, so that the land stewards have the resources to do the work. And also what we call evaluators. Evaluators can be very different kind of aspects of evaluation. It can be kind of the technical side from satellite imagery and bioacoustics, or it could be expert opinions and community input. So in that way, it can be a wide variety of signals that tell kind of the funders what are the land stewards and what are the projects that should be trusted and should actually be funded. And so this is kind of the data that we actually care about. And the way we approach this is that all of this data can be structured around a shared record. So the land stewards, they basically start. So in that way, it's really coming from the land stewards who basically document their activities. And it can be kind of retroactively, but it can also be forward-looking, so kind of a proposal. But the core of an activity record is who did what, when, and where. And evaluators then can add different signals to enrich this record. And also land steward can add additional data that they have when the work is ongoing. And this is in that way, all the stuff that you are doing anyways, that you take pictures, you know what actually happens, and you try to add kind of a rich picture to what happens on your land. And
Holke, can I jump in?
Yes.
I want to do the bridging work here. So for example, I've listened to this presentation several times, but I'm when I'm thinking, I'm okay, so let's say I am a land steward and I work in a community project where we have a fruit orchard, right? So we've planted 10,000 trees. So my group, let's say, trees for the world is the land steward on the top there. And then that activity record is who did what, when, and where. So me and my community planted 10,000 trees on this day. And then the evaluators are people like maybe a satellite group, right? A satellite data company. And they actually take photos from the sky monitoring that change, or bioacoustic data monitoring, like Holke mentioned. So we can actually take our phones, like an iPhone, this amazing work that our colleagues Gainforest have been leading, and listen and say, okay, we're taking audio records of this orchard every 6 months for the next 6 years. And we found that after we planted those 10,000 fruit trees, this species came back and this species came back, and we can actually hear the biodiversity in the forest recorded on our phones. So that's the work of the evaluators, right? It's drone technologies, it's satellites, it's soil microbiology. This is kind of a different party that's involved in supplementing the activity records. Okay. Holke, take it.
Yes.
Take us home.
Yes. And so this activity record, this is what we call a hypercert. And a hypercert in that way is really like a living record of work. And living record because it starts with an activity claim, but then all the additional data sources kind of really enrich it. And it's not like a static record. It grows and it really gives us a picture of the work and its value. And then this activity record, this hypercert, can also be funded so that the land stewards responsible for the activity have the resources to continue their work. One example of this, another platform, and Sophia already mentioned Gainforest. Gainforest also is building Hypercerts, and I will go into another demo. So let's see how this one works out. And what I want to show you is basically the creation of a activity claim and how this then also can be seen basically across different applications. So here we are on the beta version of Hypercerts. So this is a work in progress as well. And I'm already logged in here, and you see a bunch of Hypercerts. And if somebody wonders why it's called Hypercerts in this case, Bumi is Indonesian for earth and kind of the ground that we are living on. And so that's why this platform is called Hypercerts. And in that way, when we create a new record, we can go back here and basically create a record here. As an example, we can create an activity record for this learning lab. So this is the MaEarth Learning Lab 14, is that correct? On certified. And when does it happen? It's today. So today. And let's say it's environmental education. So with this, I just can copy and paste some text in there. You can auto-generate like a very short description. And then we can add some users. I can add myself as I'm presenting, but then also Shafi, who has done a lot of work in the background, and Adam, and Kama. So it's not just me. You can add the site where you're actually where you're working. So you can just kind of draw where you're working if you want to. I mean, this is just an example. I am currently in London, so I will select this. This is I did this before already. And then if I give the permissions that I can actually include the work of the others in this Hypercert, I can continue. I can check the data again. and I can publish this one. All right, and then I can view this, and this is basically now when we thought about the activity claim, who did what, when, and where. Now we have the contributors here. What did they do? Some environmental education. There's a description of what happened here. Now again, if we go to the Hyperscan, let's go to the feed here, and we can see that just now this profile posted a new activity claim. And here you can see that 2 hours ago I was testing this. So there's another one already. And if you just want to see the activity claims, there are different activity claims here. And we can also sort this by kind of what are actually the high quality inputs that we have seen. And you can see here now some of the Hypercerts that we have seen on the other platform. And I want to show you one specific here because see, and this is kind of like the feed of like amazing work that is going on. Okay, and the one that I was looking for is not shown here right now, but I will go back to this side with Hypercerts. Here this Hypercert, because we can also see that there is a donation. So we not only track the work, but here we track also the donation that is connected to this Hypercert.
So yeah, this is, for example, we're seeing like we created a Hypercert for this session we're having together, but let's say, again, I'm a land steward, I'm planting trees, and every time that I'm doing this, I could actually be demonstrating by uploading photos and videos and supplementing this information into a Hypercert or a different sort of certification like this. And, within the context of, and I'd love to I think this is the greater kind of the layer of why these structures are important is right now we have folks that are writing reports with AI, and we have people that are reading reports with AI, right? And we're starting to see that we're just sending PDFs back and forth to each other without meaningfully engaging with the content and the expressions of change and impact. So if we're actually adapting to how the technological landscape is working, we're really tracking this and thinking that this is going to be the future of how we start to track and record and articulate data and change from any kind of context, right? But especially in this case, environmental data. It's much more interactive, obviously, ethically. It's moving in a direction that we feel more aligned with in terms of having it be decentralized, community-based. And what's going to happen with this is it's going to start to look a little bit more like sharing of photos and videos and seeing the funding transparently and being in a much less opaque and kind of Byzantine funding landscape, but you actually have it all here on what is open source technology, which is really incredible. So a little more context for just like how epic this is. Yeah.
This is so what we have seen is that the way a lot of projects actually communicate today already is they are sometimes required to create like kind of the impact report at the end of the year or communicate to funders through, okay, like I have to write this report. But in addition to that, there's a lot of data already on social media. So, and how can we actually use this data also in a more structured way and in a more open way for this type of kind of common shared infrastructure that then can be used by many funders at the same time. And it doesn't mean that we need to enter our data over and over again for any new reports, because it's actually in one place where you control it and you can then direct it to different funders and wherever you want the data to appear. So imagine also like when we see a map and you actually see the data appearing on a map. So you not only have a feed similar to like a social media feed, but now suppose you have either the activities that happen, or you have additional information from like bioacoustic sensors that actually like tell us live like what happened in different places. What is it that we actually see, and what is it that we can engage with directly, either as a funder or a project where there are also potentially ways to collaborate because you actually like have more transparency into the whole system. Is kind of the second demo where we wanted to show how really kind of the data that we care about is the data about what is the amazing work that has been done every day, and how can we actually show that this is valuable. And oftentimes it's actually people on the ground, they know the projects, but they are not heard by the funders. So when you have a kind of the ability for communities to signal to funders, this is the projects in our areas that really care about the land and that really do amazing work, how can we really bring this up to the funders so that the funders see the right signals to fund the work that is doing the impact on the ground. All right, that was this demo. And ultimately, what we are really building is a shared data layer. And the shared data layer is then the fundament for new funding systems for nature. And the way we are thinking about it, so the shared data layer is kind of the context that sits here on the bottom. Then we have the decision-making mechanisms and the funding mechanisms to fund projects. What I mean with funding mechanisms, that can be grants, that can be milestone bounties, that can be crowdfunding. With decision-making mechanism, it is that a funder could just say, okay, I'm a funder, I decide just like by myself who I want to fund. But it could also be that there's a jury, that the community decides, that it is decided via kind of the crowd. There can be democratic mechanisms, deliberative democratic processes that decide how the funds are actually distributed. But all of these decision-making mechanisms depend on what information is actually getting into them. So, and this is kind of the piece of this whole system that we from Hypercerts and Certified hold. So we are not doing kind of everything because it is really a collaborative approach, but we try to build the building block, how we can really share this data so that the decision-making mechanisms can be built. And then this is basically always a loop because the projects create the work and create the impact. And with the evaluations and the measurement, the community input, we enrich the context and then goes back into the decision-making mechanisms that enable the funding for the projects. And when I say we are not doing all of this, I already showed you Hypercerts by Gainforce here, the second logo, but then also, of course, our own My Earth here is also building exactly that. So on top of the data layer that we are creating, My Earth is building a crowdfunding platform to then fund projects. And if you go into that, it's really kind of this approach that what My Earth taps into is a decentralized sense-making system. Because when we want to allocate funds, where do we actually get the knowledge from? Where should that be allocated to? And when we take the approach of a crowdfunding platform, we actually say there are a lot of small funders that actually know how like large amounts of funding should be allocated. So we are tapping into the communities, the projects that have active communities to support the projects, but then a larger amount of matching funds will be distributed based on how many funders, like small funders, have donated to a specific project. So this is community signal and how much they have funded the projects. And what this really does is it enables us to kind of scale up this funding system, because we are not relying on kind of centralized decision-making mechanisms. We are relying on that the data that we collect together about the projects will create kind of the right decisions for the funding allocation. So this is kind of the first step, because then when we start with this and we add more and more data, you actually over time can improve our decision making mechanism and scale it up. Because ultimately the task here is to distribute like large amounts of money to actually hundreds of thousands of projects, because every project that we want to fund is actually like a small project, because the small projects are connected with the land, and we cannot just like scale up these projects, because then they lose the connection with the land. So that is really why this decentralized sense-making system is needed, because the projects, we cannot do full due diligence on every 100,000 projects. So this is kind of our approach to helping to solve this problem. And this is really based on the insight of like on the ground, people are actually already there who know what are the good projects and what are the projects that actually only claim to have impact, have potentially good marketing, or follow some metrics that don't actually make sense on the ground. And those are the projects that we don't want to fund. We want to fund the projects that really are doing the right work.
Can I jump in and share
Yes,
something, some of
yes.
my thinking as well? Yeah, I think, Hoka, you really drove it home. Like part of, someone that we quote often is Ilya Prigozhin, who talks about islands of coherence. And so, thinking about um, just looking at the world and seeing how there's a tendency in our cultural zeitgeist to talk about scaling up, right? So how does one small good thing expand? But when you actually begin to think on an ecosystemic level or on a cultural level, things don't necessarily work. Like you can't just spread things out, but especially in the case of regeneration, right? It's like every different type of soil, or as the plants change, or as the ecosystem changes, that takes careful relationship and listening with land. And so what we've been up to at Ma Earth is actually being in relationship and cultivating relationship and learning with the land stewards who know their land very, very well. And what this kind of technology actually offers us is, like Holke was saying, a way for us to begin to support place-based regeneration. So rather than just throwing, a multi-million-dollar grants at awesome scalable solutions, which has its role in some cases, nobody's thinking about these incredible tens and thousands of projects all around the world of people who are just loving land and listening to land and doing amazing, I mean, incredible work regenerating degraded ecosystems, bringing back water to dried landscapes. The work is incredible, but it takes technology that considers, that can actually support the decentralized distribution of funding. Nothing to this day exists to support that. And so this is sort of underpinning this technology, the work that we do with Ma Earth, and our theory of change more broadly. So thank you for articulating that, because we talk about it, but it's actually it takes like literal technological infrastructure to support that. And another thing I'll say about this is that technology mediates relationships in a major way in our world today. So, if I'm a small organization that really wants to scale up, I'm going to send a grant application to a big organization, and I spend 2.5 weeks with my whole work, like, ecosystem working on it. And then, maybe I'll get a response back. And that's not interactive. That's not dynamic. That's not considering community decision making. And, this is planet Earth. We're all a part of this. And we're really wanting to support creation of technologies that actually supports that and, really makes us feel collectively involved in this kind of work. So this technology represents those values that we're holding. So thanks to the technologists who are working on the ground and really thinking in collaboration with the land stewards. I haven't seen anything else like it, but it's really, really meaningful work to me and to so many people in this space. So that's what I have to share about it.
Cool. Yes, and the technologists behind all of this, like what we are also building on, and this is what we talked about earlier briefly with at protocol. This is kind of the underlying technology that we are building on, and what a protocol really is a protocol that has been developed in response to Twitter and the platforms that are closed, that are introduced in the beginning. And some of you might know Blue Sky. Blue Sky is an alternative social media application where over 40 million users are using it already. And so this technology has been proven at scale already. And the way that I introduced in the beginning, that you really own your data, is exactly what Blue Sky does. Like, so you have your own, you can have your own data server, you can have different hosting providers where your data is, and it gets aggregated into a very normal user experience from a kind of social media approach. And this is also being standardized right now. There's a working group at the Internet Engineering Task Force, which is also the kind of steward organization of internet protocols like TCP/IP. So it really becomes something that is a strong foundation for this. And what we are doing is we adopting this protocol, protocol, and we are then applying it to a different use case. And our use case in this case, of course, it is how do we fund regenerative land projects? And what we need for that is kind of some additions of like kind of the group accounts that I showed you, a really simple email-based login that I showed you. Right now, the data that is on the protocol is all public, but private data is also coming soon. This is something that the protocol community is working on, and Blue Sky is working on it as well. So we also will have like private data where you can selectively share it with the people that you want it to share with. And the most important thing here is that there's no single platform that kind of captures the value that is created through this network. So if we build platforms, like different platforms that use this data, there's no one platform that captures all the value, because everybody else can also build a kind of front-end, a platform that uses the same data. So the data ownership is not something that gets captured. So I think one of the last points here to introduce is also the part of how AI actually like changes this, because we have seen this picture, document and review and fund, but we also know that already today, land stewards, evaluators, and funders all use AI in some ways. And this only gets accelerated over the next years or even in the next months, how we are actually using this. And from our perspective, this means that it becomes actually much more important to have a transparent record of actually what happens and how AI systems are interacting with this data. So, and this is for us something where we believe that a trusted data layer becomes really essential infrastructure. Because otherwise we will have kind of just a black box of what happened. And we have kind of the evaluations, their funding decisions that we cannot understand anymore. And we lose control of what is it actually that the system is kind of targeted at. And with a shared data layer, we can observe like what actually is happening at what point so that we can stay in control. To conclude, 2 slides, and then I think we have a couple of minutes for questions. What we really try to do with Certified is that we have sovereign data, that you control your data, and not one platform can gate your data from other platforms. We create one identity that you have a simple login across different applications, and that enables kind of reputation network, because the trust and signals that you get from one platform are now reusable across different platforms. And all of that is then kind of pointed at enabling new funding systems for regeneration at scale. And these funding systems, it's really kind of a fundamental paradigm shift from what we see here on the left side, from like data silos and just donation receipt, centralized impact verifiers that we see in the carbon markets, the kind of just like static systems that only go for narratives and kind of the marketing speech, to really kind of the user-controlled data, where we can really show who funded what and what were the outcomes of what they funded. They can build impact portfolios. We have multiple evaluators with multiple approaches that add a rich data set to give us signals what actually works and what doesn't work, what should be funded and what shouldn't be funded. We add to the narratives, and narratives are still important. We add verified data and trust-based funding, because some things actually cannot be measured that directly. So trust-based funding is something that is extremely important, no matter how many data points we can actually collect. But like, if the community trusts a project, that is in some way also a data point, but it's not the data point that we think about, like measurable metrics sometimes. And then it will be a combination of human and AI collective intelligence that arises, that helps us steering this whole system. And it enables really a self-reinforcing learning system, because we also learn what decision-making mechanisms, what funding mechanisms really work, and which should be replaced or improved. And with that, I'm excited to conclude and leave some time for the questions. And just as a reminder, why this work is so important, like, and not just the work of the shared data layer, but the whole kind of funding ecosystem, is because what we choose to fund shapes really the future that we create. That is kind of the paradigm that we live in today. And that's also why we have to work on how to allocate our resources in a better, smarter way. So to really get the resources to the people who are doing the work on the ground. And we should not bog them down into grant applications, and make their lives as easy as possible with just sharing, as easy as it is to share on social media, to share their work, and with that, get the funding that they need.
Holke, thank you so much. I would, if no one else has a question, I'd love to just like ask you, like, how did you get involved in this work? Like, obviously, you come from a political economy background. I know you also have a background as like many generations German farmers. Like, what's it been like blending together this world of technology and land stewardship so far?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting that, like, for me, like, lots of pieces come together here, as you mentioned. Like, my family are all farmers for, like, in northern Germany, and then I ended up at some point working on large-scale social innovation processes in Germany between civil society and the German government and other large players, like foundations and companies. And we really tried to enable the bottom-up innovation power to coordinate and get the right funding to, like, further their ideas, because there's so much innovation potential in civil society. And I've seen amazing projects, and some of them also worked, but a lot of the amazing projects, it was like really difficult to get funding. And that is how I kind of explored what are alternative systems where we can engage with kind of building a different system while we experiment on kind of not like the small sizes, but like also larger sums of money. And that brought me into the blockchain space, the Web3 space, and I became a research scientist for public goods funding, because the same problem that we have here also exists for open source software. So how do we fund all the amazing open source developers and reward them and recognize them for the work that they do to keep kind of like an open infrastructure alive? And so with that and kind of the resources that were flowing into the blockchain space, there was an area where we could create new experiments with new mechanisms and allocate significant amount of funding towards these new experiments. And that's how I ended up with working on Hypercerts. This was out of Protocol Labs. And then I spun out the Hypercerts Foundation from there, and then added kind of other use cases. And the use case that I'm most excited about is, of course, the use case that we are talking about here, because it's a most pressing one, and the one where this decentralized technology really makes the most sense, because we need to tap into this decentralized sense-making system and hear what a lot of people around the world see every day and how they can be involved into the allocation of these resources, and that these systems are not just top-down systems. So that's why this technology for me is so appropriate for this use case of how do we fund regenerative land projects. That's why I'm excited to partner with My Earth, to partner with Gainforest, and other organizations as well, to really bring this to life and show what the technology can do. And then I think we can also apply it to many other use cases as well. But that's kind of how I ended up in this space.
All right. Thank you so much, Holke, for taking us behind the scenes of Certified, giving us a little bit more information about Certs, about the interoperability ecosystem, and yeah, just like bridging this world between building real financial infrastructure that is decentralized and open sourced in service of ecological regeneration, and making sure that we can get funding distributed to projects all around the world in a way that respects their work, their values, and their landscapes flourishing. So thank y'all for joining us in Learning Lab. If you ever have a topic that you want to dig deeper into, send us a message at community@maearth.com, and I will do my best to get us a great teacher to join us in that learning journey. And yeah, we will see you next time in the Learning Lab. Thank you.